So this also goes to Britney Spears, for instance. She also was trying to break free from her mind control. Why she was acting so strange, and why she shaved off her head, and why she kept telling reporters that she just wanted them to stop touching her. So she was just trying to break free, but unfortunately, she wasn't strong enough, and God bless her, so I love her. I've always been a fan. But they were able to get her back and put her in quote-unquote rehab, meaning to reprogram her to be able to control her again. So that's why after that you see her acting kind of aloof all the time, kind of spacey, because she's still under their control. So once they're able to reprogram you, once you try to break free, then they'll control you forever. If they're not able to control you and reprogram you when you're trying to break free, then they kill you. Like Marilyn, like so many people, and even myself. Which it's going to be hard to talk about. This is the first time I'm speaking out about this. I've never spoken out about this, about my personal experiences. But first of all, why do you think in the Illuminati symbols in the music industry, why do you think you see so many monarch butterflies covering one eye? All these butterflies, because they represent and they're paying homage to the monarch butterfly, which they discovered using mind control with the MK Ultra. And that goes back to Dr. Green. He was the main one who did all that. But anyways, so my personal experience with all that, which is hard for me to talk about. I'm not sure if I'm still ready to talk about that, but all I'm going to say is that they did the same thing to me. I was also offered, the others came to me, and literally they locked me in a room, sat me down for about an hour, because I was trying to break free from things they wanted me to do that I did not want to do. I was sitting there crying, and they sat me down and made me an offer. Now this is very important, so listen to this, okay? When you hear some people who say that they sold their soul to the devil, that pretty much means that they were also made an offer, just like I was made an offer, and they accepted. So that's why they're extremely rich, extremely famous. The only problem is they forever sold their soul to the devil, and they can never ever again do what they want, because now they can't do what they want. Anyway, so I was offered the same thing. They sat me down and said, "Listen, Tila," and I say this verbatim. They said, "Listen, I have the power to make you look either really good on TV or really bad. Trust me. I have the power to do that. So why don't you make up your mind, stay here, and do what I say, and we'll make you very, very, very famous." So that was the moment when the others came to me and offered me to sell my soul. I refused. That is why, if you remember, if you compare season 1, they made me look like an angel, so sweet, because that was the real side of me. But that's why when I refused their offer, that's why in season 2, they made me look like a major bitch so that everyone would hate me. That whole fight with Christy at the end and all that, I mean, I was literally produced. Yeah, they would literally tell me in my ear to just go off on her, act like a bitch, and yada yada. And at that time, I didn't really understand. But now looking back, I know exactly why they did that. Because they edited it to make me look like a bitch, so have everyone hate me. But that's not even a big deal. Now fast forward, this is the more serious part, which I never ever spoke about. And I still don't like to speak about because it's something very personal to me. But you guys remember when my fiance passed a long time ago? You know, when it first happened, everybody was, you know, sending me condolences and, you know, all that stuff. And then something strange happened. I'm not going to get into it, but then all of a sudden, the media started portraying me as, all of a sudden, I became this criminal. And it was like a mass media everywhere. So, of course, you, the people who watch the news and the media and what they're shoving down your throats, their propaganda against me, of course you'd hate me. Of course you'd think, oh, she's doing this for attention. Ugh. That was the worst time of my life. I mean, to lose someone you love, not only that, but someone you're about to marry, even just someone you know that died, I mean, and then having the world blame you, that was just really a tough time for me, which I don't want to go back on. But it's important for me to speak out about it now because I'm so happy that the truth is finally starting to leak out there for whomever is starting to see my truths. So anyways, if you guys remember, do you remember during those times, those couple years, I seemed all crazy and attention whore-like and yada yada? Well, that was all propaganda from the media. Because if you look it up, my fiance, my late fiance, her family, they're very powerful. Her father is part of the others. He's actually in the... Anyways, just look that up. So because they're so powerful, and they... Well, I don't want to say too much. Anyways, let's just put it this way. They're so powerful enough to have the media control what is being said out there. So to make me look like the bad one, to take the attention off of them. Because I know a lot of stuff about them that my fiance told me. And they were afraid that I would tell the world what really happened. Which I was not. I was begging them to just let me mourn for my wife. Because I wasn't there to... It was a heartbreaking time. So anyways, that's that. You know, Dave Chappelle, he spoke out about the others as well, and he refused. He spoke out about it. So they were trying to get him. That's why he went to Africa. And that's why the media started making him, oh, Dave Chappelle went crazy. He had a meltdown. Similar to my story, you know. Oh, Tila Tequila's crazy. She's just wanting attention. Same with Dave Chappelle. Oh, he's crazy. He had a meltdown. That's because they are afraid of us, people like Dave Chappelle, myself, and many other brave soldiers who are speaking out. This way, when we speak out, no one would believe us. We've been discredited as crazy, so they brush us off. That's their protocol. That's how they control you guys. That's how they keep you from the truth. When people like myself is trying to speak out about the truth, we get called crazy. So the others are safe. They can sleep well at night while we, the truth speakers and freedom fighters, are the ones labeled as crazy. All right, so anyways,